Hey, welcome. Thanks for joining us today. We're so glad you are with us. We're going to dive in with some worship. Would you join us? I count on one thing, and the same God that never fails will not fail me now. You won't fail me now in the waiting. The same God who's never late is working all things out. You're working all things out. Yes, I will lift you high in the lowest valley. Yes, I will bless your name. Yes, I will sing for joy when my heart is heavy all my day. Yes, I will. I count on one thing, and the same God that never fails will not fail me now. You won't fail me now in the waiting. The same God who's never late is working all things out. You're working all things out. Yes, I will lift you high in the lowest valley. Yes, I will bless your name. Yes, I will sing for joy when my heart is heavy all my days. Yes, I will for all my days. Oh, yes, I will. I choose to praise, to glorify the name of all names. And nothing can stand against. I choose to praise, to glorify the name of all names. And nothing can stand against. I choose to praise, to glorify the name of all names. And nothing can stand against. I choose to praise, to glorify the name of all names. Nothing can stand against. Yes, I will lift you high in the lowest valley. Yes, I will bless your name. Yes, I will sing for joy when my heart is heavy all my days. Oh, yes, I will for all my days. Yes, I will for all my days. Yes, I will.
Hey everyone, and welcome to Movement Church. My name is Don Hunter, and it's great to be with you today. Happy Independence Day weekend. I want to start off today by giving you a pro tip on how to use this weekend to draw close to your neighbors. Here are the step-by-step instructions. Number one, go to your nearest and favorite fireworks dealer. Then I want you to load up on Whisker biscuits, honky lighters, Husker do's, Husker don'ts, cherry bombs, Nipsey daisers, with or without a scooter stick, and of course, your Whistlin's kitty chasers. You want the stuff that's gonna go boom. So then you're gonna wait till about 10:30 at night when it's nice and quiet, and I want you to just go to town. The following morning, you're gonna bake the most delicious cookies of your entire life and deliver them to your neighbor's door as an empathetic apology. It's pretty much guaranteed that you'll be best friends moving forward. you are welcome. Well, you're joining us today as we continue our series in Philippians, studying joy in the midst of a pandemic. Sarah Nepper from our teaching team is going to lead us in God's Word and the wisdom He has given us that applies to us today in 2020. And one last thing before we dig in with Sarah, we are loving on our community right now by putting on Hilliard's Back to School Fair. We know school may look different this fall, but Movement has committed to support over 100 kids in the Hilliard school system. Go to hilliardsbacktoschoolfair.com, read the instructions on how to purchase school supplies, and help those that we are serving and showing God's love to in our community. Thanks in advance for grabbing supplies and loving on our neighbors. Let's continue in our series.
Hi, Movement Church. Thanks for joining us today. We're continuing our series in the book of Philippians. And my name's Sarah. I'm part of the teaching and research team here at Movement. And I'm excited to get to share with you today. Before we jump into Philippians, I have been thinking actually a lot about travel, and I don't know if you have found yourself in the same spot. It seems to be maybe one of those things like we always want what we can't have. And so since we've been quarantined and kind of, stuck in these places that we currently are, there's this part of me that is just like, I wish that I could go somewhere else. And so since we can't, I've been looking at a lot of old pictures, and I've been rereading journals from when I've been different places. And just this week, I was looking at some pictures from a year ago. I got to spend some time in Switzerland. And I was rereading my journal about one of my last days there. I was in this little village, this town called Zermatt, and that's the town that the Matterhorn is in. So the Matterhorn is this huge, famous mountain in Switzerland. And so I had the opportunity to take this kind of cable car. You go to the top of this viewing area to look at the mountain. So like I said, it's one of my last days there. I'm like really excited about okay, I want to like finish things well. I want to see this really famous site. And so I get all bundled up. It was June, but we're in the mountains, so it's cold. So I get all bundled up and I take this cable car to the top, and we're actually going to show you some pictures of what it looked like. I wish that I had a video. This first picture, you can kind of see that there's all of this like dust that's blowing around. So that's not just like a low sitting cloud, that's actually dust. When I was up on the top of this viewing station, it's kind of this big flat area where you can look all around, and there's mountains all the way around you. I have never experienced wind like this before. The wind was so intense that I thought, I'm gonna blow off the top of this mountain. Like this is the end. I mean, like I'm supposed to fly home tomorrow, but I'm gonna blow off this mountain today. This is it. And so like there were just a handful of us up there, and the wind would come through in these like massive gusts. And so there were these like stone benches, and several times I actually like crouched all the way down to the ground and like put my head between my knees, trying to keep the wind from like blowing me over, trying to keep my center of gravity low, trying to keep the dust from blowing into my eyes. It was it was unreal. I am not doing it justice. It was unbelievable how windy it was. And so we're going to show you another picture. I don't know that this picture really does it justice either, but I felt like I had, gone through a tornado. So my hair is blown all over the place. I took this picture, I sent it to my sister. I said like, things are not going well on this adventure up the mountain to see the Matterhorn. I actually never got to see the Matterhorn. The wind kept the clouds in front of the mountain the whole time. But as I was getting ready to leave this viewing platform and come back down, I have to tell you, and I was reminded of this as I reread my journal, I was so grumpy. I was so frustrated that I had gone all the way up there. I had spent this money to take this cable car up there. It takes a long time to get up there. And then not only am I not seeing the mountain, but it was miserable. Like the wind made me feel awful. It hurt my eyes. I was so cold. You couldn't stand outside and enjoy anything. You just wanted to be anywhere else. And then I spotted, and this is the last picture we'll show you, I spotted this little, what I discovered was a prayer chapel. And so I went inside, and this was something that I tried to do a lot when I was in Switzerland. Anytime I would spot a church or a little chapel, I would go inside and I would explore. The churches all over Switzerland are open all the time and often empty. And so I went inside this little building, and I have never, I think, understood the feeling of silence and peace in a way that I did when I walked into that chapel. I mean, it was like I went from, honestly, I've never been in a tornado. I do love the movie Twister. It's one of my favorite movies of all time. I don't care what you think about that. I've never been in a tornado, but man, that wind, the closest thing that I can compare it to is what it must feel like for a tornado to start to come on you. And then all of a sudden to go into this little building and all of the wind stops and it's warm and it's quiet. And I sat down and I decided, I'm just gonna spend a little time in here before I go back out to brave the wind. And as I sat there, I had been working my way through the book of Psalms. I was reading 5 Psalms a day. And so I sat down and I decided I'm gonna read my Psalms for the day in here. And one of the first Psalms that I read was Psalm 31. And I wanna read to you some of the very first verses that I read as I was sitting quietly in this little prayer chapel in the village of Zermatt, trying to see the Matterhorn, but only being in the midst of a windstorm. Here's what I read. "O Lord, I have come to you for protection. Don't let me be disgraced. Save me, for you do what is right. Turn your ear to listen to me. Rescue me quickly. Be my rock of protection, a fortress where I will be safe. You are my rock and my fortress. For the honor of your name, lead me out of this danger." And then the last verse in that chapter says, "So be strong and courageous, all you who put your hope in the Lord." I read these verses and I thought, the idea of a fortress has never meant so much as it maybe does right now. Like, I have understood the idea of fortress in a metaphorical way, but this idea of fortress, and some translations use the word refuge as well there. Those ideas meant more in that moment, as I had just stepped out of this tornado-like wind and into this place that was quiet and warm and safe and secure. And I thought, this is what a refuge feels like. This is what a fortress feels like. It's protection from the craziness outside. Now, we're not doing a study in the Psalms, we're doing a study in Philippians. And so maybe you're wondering, why are we starting here? Well, like I said, I've been thinking a lot about travel and about seeing all of these different places. And as I thought of that day, as I was reminded of my time on top of that mountain in the midst of this windstorm, and then stepping into this place of refuge, it made me think of the verses that we're going to study together today in Philippians. We're going to be in Philippians chapter 4, and we're going to start in verse 4. And these verses, my guess is, these are verses that you probably know. You've heard before, maybe you have them written somewhere in your house or on a coffee cup. Philippians chapter 4, verse 4 through verse 9. We're going to come back to this idea in Psalm 31. But let me read these words to you from Philippians 4. Paul, who's the author of Philippians, says this: "Always be full of joy in the Lord. I say it again, rejoice. Let everyone see that you are considerate in all you do. Remember, the Lord is coming soon. Don't worry about anything. Instead, pray about everything. Tell God what you need and thank Him for all He has done. Then you will experience God's peace, which exceeds anything we can understand. His peace will guard your hearts and mind as you live in Christ Jesus." We're going to stop there for now. As we read these words, I don't know what kind of ideas or thoughts come into your mind. But we read these words and they say, like, you should be full of joy. You should be considerate of the people around you. You shouldn't worry about anything. Instead of worrying, take all of your concerns to God. And as I read those verses, as I read these verses that they're so familiar to me, I have been reading these verses since I was young. I read those verses and if I'm being honest with you, my tendency is to say, yeah, that sounds really good, but I can't do that. I can't. You don't know what's happening in my life right now. You don't know what's happening in the world right now. Paul, when you wrote these words a couple of thousand years ago, you didn't know what 2020 was going to look like. You don't know what kind of pain I'm facing. As I read these words this week, I was reminded of some friends of mine they're currently experiencing a death in their family. And it was unexpected, and there's a lot of questions. And I think about these friends of mine, and I think, could I say these words to them? Could I say, always be full of joy in the Lord, friends? Could I say to them, don't worry about anything. Don't worry about this. Talk to God about it. Don't worry about it. I don't know how you feel about these words, but I think if we're being honest, likely there's a part of us that says, this sounds like an impossible task. Yeah, okay. I know I'm supposed to have joy. That's been kind of the theme that's been running all the way through Philippians. So if you've been with us for the last few weeks, you know that keeps coming up over and over again. How do we find joy, and how do we live with joy, and how do we exude joy to other people? I know that that's what I'm supposed to do. I know that I'm not supposed to be a person who worries. I know that I'm supposed to be kind and considerate to the people around me. I know that I'm supposed to go to God with every prayer and every concern. I know I'm supposed to, but it feels too hard. I know I'm supposed to, but I don't know how to get myself there. If you are anything like me, if you have approached your relationship with God in maybe any way that is similar to ways that I have found that I've approached my relationship with God, then maybe the reason that these words feel so overwhelming, and if we're being honest, impossible, is because we look at these words and we say, I can't do that. I can't, in the circumstances that I'm in, have joy and be considerate and not worry and give everything to God and let Him handle it. I can't do it. Don't you know that I'm a worrier? Don't you know that I'm someone who tends to be negative? Don't you know that my life has been full of difficult circumstances? Don't you know that there are all of these things that are stacked against my ability to be able to accomplish those things? And I think if we were to say that to Paul, or if we can go a step further, if we were able to say that to Jesus himself, I think Jesus would say, yeah, I know. I know you don't have it in you to be joyful all the time. I know that you don't have it in you to be considerate to all the people around you. I know that you don't have it in you to not worry. I know that you don't have it in you to come to me all the time. I know that you're not strong enough on your own. And then I think he would say, why did you stop reading? Look to what is written next. And so we'll go to verse 8 now. And now, dear brothers and sisters, one final thing. Fix your thoughts on what is true and honorable and right and pure and lovely and admirable. Think about these things that are excellent and worthy of praise. Keep putting into practice all you learned and received from me, everything that you heard from me and saw me doing. Then the God of peace will be with you. Now, I'll tell you that for so long when I would read verse 8, this idea of like, okay, I need to fix my mind, fix my thoughts on what is true and honorable and right and pure and lovely and admirable, things that are excellent and worthy of praise, that often when I would read that, I would think like, okay, so that means I need to not listen to music that is bad and not read things that lead me the wrong direction and not watch things that take me. And I'm not saying that that's not wrapped up in here, but I think we need to go more fundamental than that. When Paul says to these people, brothers and sisters, fix your thoughts on what is true, on what is honorable, on what is right, on what is pure, on what is lovely, on what is admirable. What is at the very center of all of that? What is the thing that is the most true? What is the thing that is the most admirable, the most honorable, the most excellent, the most worthy of praise? Or maybe the better way to ask it is, who is that one? It's our Jesus. Paul says you need to live as people of peace. You need to live as people who don't worry. You need to live as people who are full of joy and who are considerate of other people. And how do we do that? We have to be reminded of who our Jesus is and what he does. We have to be able to step out of the storm and step into the fortress and step into the refuge. To go back to when I was in Zermatt, as I was on the top of that mountain, if you would have said to me, Sarah, just find some quiet, just find some stillness, just find some peace, I would have said, well, are you an idiot? That's not possible. Look around. I'm almost getting blown off of the top of the mountain. Yeah, I've got some anxiety here. I'm worried. But then finally I was able to step into a refuge. And now, once I stepped in there, my whole focus was able to shift. Now it doesn't feel scary. Now I'm able to appreciate what's happening around me. I'm even able to look at the windstorm and go, this is wild. I've never experienced something like this before. I'm able then even to turn my attention to God and to think, he made this place. And he made these winds. And he has known this place and these mountains for all of eternity, from the beginning of time. I couldn't think about those things when I was in the midst of the craziness. But I stepped into the fortress. And all of a sudden, my ability to focus shifted. Now, maybe this seems overly simplistic to you. Maybe you hear this and you go, okay, Sarah, you don't know what's happening in my life right now. You don't know what's going on. And it sounds really nice to say, just step into the fortress, but I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to get there. There isn't like an actual little like prayer chapel outside of my house that I can just go to and shut out all of the noise and all of the distraction. I know. But if we continue to try to fight this fight on our own, we're going to be frustrated every time. If you continue to try to find joy on your own, you are simply going to keep looking to circumstances and people to feed that joy, which is not, if you remember from the very first week, is not what we're supposed to do. If you continue to try to do this on your own, you are not going to be able to push worry aside. If you continue to try to do this on your own, you're not going to be able to go to God with everything. Instead, you're going to get stuck in your mind in this inner dialogue, this inner conversation that you're having with yourself. You were never designed to find joy and peace on your own. You weren't. You were designed to turn to the one who can provide that joy and peace for you. And so we have to be reminded of truths like we find in Psalm 31. And I want to read those verses to you again. Psalm 31 This is verses 1 through 3, and then I'll drop down to verse 24. Oh Lord, I have come to you for protection. Don't let me be disgraced. Save me, for you do what is right. Turn your ear to listen to me. Rescue me quickly. Be my rock of protection, a fortress where I will be safe. You are my rock and my fortress. For the honor of your name, lead me out of this danger. Be strong and courageous, all you who put your hope in the Lord. I'm going to read you some other verses. These are from Proverbs chapter 3. Proverbs chapter 3, verses 25 and 26. You need not be afraid of sudden disaster or the destruction that comes upon the wicked, for the Lord is your security. He will keep your foot from being caught in a trap. If you are struggling to find joy, if you are overcome with worry about health, about finances, about your family, if you are struggling to find peace, then what I want to encourage you to do today is to remind yourself to actually slow things down, hit pause on this video, turn everything off, take just a few minutes to remind yourself who your God is and what he has done to be your fortress and to be your safe place. I would encourage you to take some time, if you're watching this with your family or with friends, to actually do this together. Maybe take a minute or two to do it by yourselves and then share your answers together. And if you have kids, let your kids be part of this. What are ways in the last week, in the last month, even since maybe the beginning of summer or throughout all of 2020, what are ways that you can remember that God has been good to you? And maybe those things are really big. Maybe you can say, God was good to us when he protected us from this thing, or when he provided this big thing for us. Or maybe, this is one of the things I think is so beautiful about having kids involved in this, maybe those things will be really small and simple. Maybe you'll reflect and you'll think, one way that God has been so good to me is that I've gotten to eat chocolate chip pancakes several times this month, and I love those. And I don't mean to make this a joke, but I think we have to remember, like it says, I think in Psalm 16, every good thing that you receive is from God. It's a reflection of his heart to you. And yet we can get so wrapped up in the negative. We get so caught up in the negative news cycle, whether that's the news cycle on the TV or in our own minds, that we forget the small, beautiful, good things. What are the good things that God has done for you and done for your family? I would encourage you to write them down. Hang them on the refrigerator, put them up in your bathroom, put them somewhere where you will constantly be reminded, this is who my God is. And I don't mean to say that will be some sort of a magic pill, some sort of magic solution. Now I'm not worried anymore because look, God let me eat chocolate chip pancakes. What a great God. But to return to Philippians chapter 4, Paul says, you have to set your thoughts on the things that are true, the things that are honorable, the things that are noble, the things that are excellent and worthy of praise. And those things are the things that are true about your God, about who he is and what he has done for you. And when we fill our minds with those things, it doesn't erase all the worry. It doesn't make joy the immediate response, but it does make it a whole lot easier to turn to him. It makes it a whole lot easier to say, you know what? I'm kind of freaking out about this thing that's happening, whatever that thing is. But because I've chosen to fill my mind with the truth about who my God is, because I am reminded that God has been faithful to me in small ways and in big ways over this last week, month, year, I am more likely to go to him with this new concern that I have. And I am more likely to say, you know what? I am going to choose joy in this moment. Not because I feel happy about it, not because it's easy to do that, but because I am choosing to hold on to the belief that if God has been faithful to me in the past, he will be faithful to me in the future. We cannot let go of worry and embrace peace unless we choose to remember who our God is. So make a list. Make a list of how your God has been faithful to you this week, this month, this year. Bring your kids in on that. Bring your friends in on it. Make your list and text it to your movement group or to your other friends and say, look at these ways that God has been faithful to me, that God has been good to me. Tell me what yours are. It's good for us to be reminded that God's not just working in my own life. He's working in your life. He's working in my mom's life, in my dad's life, in my siblings' lives, in my friends' lives, in my coworkers' lives. God's faithfulness touches all of these people. And that makes it easier and easier for me to be reminded to turn to him. And then after you've examined your own lives, I would encourage you to make a list of ways that we can see that God has been faithful throughout time. And the best place to go to for that is to Scripture. If you're doing your own Bible reading, then awesome. Start jotting things down in a notebook or in the margins of ways as you read that you can see this is an example of God's goodness and God's faithfulness. If you don't know where to start, go to the Psalms. Over and over again throughout the Psalms, the writers of those Psalms, and the Psalms are just little poems or songs. Over and over again, those writers talk about the ways that God has been faithful to them. And the writers of the Psalms are not afraid of saying, here are also the really terrible things that have been happening. And yet, they continue to do what Paul says in Philippians chapter 4. They continue to turn their minds to what is true and excellent and worthy of praise. They continue to remind themselves of who their God is and how he has been faithful to them. Our God is not new to the scene. Our God is timeless. He has been faithful and good forever. And as I remind myself of those things, it gets easier to want to trust him. It gets easier, even on days that are hard, to say, I am going to choose hope and joy and peace. Because if God was faithful yesterday and 100 years ago and 1,000 years ago and 10,000 years ago, then he's going to be faithful today. And it might not look the way that I want it to look, but I can trust him. I can hold on to him. I have to remind myself of who he is to get to that place. I want to read a quote to you by a theologian. He says this: the life of faith consists of patience and hope. Patience formed by a long memory, and hope that our faithfulness will prove worth the risk. Let me read that one more time. The life of faith consists of patience and hope. Patience formed by a long memory, and hope that our faithfulness will prove worth the risk. It's like he's saying, the life of faith involves looking both backward and forward. I look backward, and that's what builds this patience in me. I have this long memory, a memory that goes beyond my 35 years, a memory that extends back hundreds and thousands of years as I look at God's word. And that patience develops in me a hope for the future, a hope that this is worth it. Following Jesus is worth it because of who he is and what he has done. Our big idea for the morning, to just boil it all down: remind yourself of God's past to live in present joy and peace. Remind yourself of God's past, who he has been and what he has done in all the yesterdays. Remind yourself of God's past so that you can choose to live in present joy and peace. Let me pray for us. God, we are so, so grateful that you allow us to have memories, that you allow us to be able to turn and reflect on where we've been and how you've walked with us, on where our families have been and how you've walked with them, on where your people throughout history have been and how you've walked with them. God, we thank you that you give us memories, and we ask today that you would help us to tune those memories to the right frequency, that you would help us to stay focused on the right thing, that we would turn to the things that are excellent and praiseworthy and true and noble, that we would fill our minds with who you are. And God, as we do that, I pray that that would help us to find rest. That filling our minds with those things would be like walking into that prayer chapel on top of the mountain. That it would be like stepping in from the storm. That it would give us a few moments of silence, a few moments of quiet, of warmth, of security. And that then when we step back out into the noise and into the wind and into the storm, that we bring with us this reminder of who you are and of what you have done. God, will you build this long memory in us that will allow us to have hope for the future? We want to be people of joy and of peace, but we know that we can only find that through you. So we ask that you would build that in us as individuals and as a community this week. We love you. In Jesus' strong name we ask these things. Amen.
There's a table that you've prepared for me in the presence of my enemy. It's your body and your blood you shed for me. This is how I fight my battles. There's a table that you've prepared for me in the presence of my enemies. It's your body and your blood you shed for me. This is how I fight my battles. And I believe you've overcome it. I will lift my song of praise for all you've done. This is how I fight my battles. This is how I fight my battles. This is how I fight my battles. And this is how I fight my battles. In the valley, I know that you're with me. Surely your goodness and your mercy follow me. So my weapons are praise and thanksgiving. This is how I fight my battles. And I believe you've overcome it. I will lift my song of praise for all you've done. This is how I fight my battles. This is how I fight my battles. I'm surrounded, but I'm surrounded by you. It may look like I'm surrounded, but I'm surrounded by you. It may look like I'm surrounded, but I'm surrounded by you. It may look like I'm surrounded, but I'm surrounded by you. Oh, it may look like I'm surrounded, but I'm surrounded by you. It may look like I'm surrounded by you. This is how I fight my battles. This is how I fight my battles. This is how I fight my battles. This is how. It may look like I'm surrounded, but I'm surrounded by you. It may look like I'm surrounded, but I'm surrounded by you. It may look like I'm surrounded, but I'm surrounded by you. It may look like I'm surrounded, but I'm surrounded by you. It may look like I'm surrounded, but I'm surrounded by you. It may look like I'm surrounded, but I'm surrounded by you. It may look like I'm surrounded, but I'm surrounded by you. It may look like I'm surrounded, but I'm surrounded by you.
Well, it was great worshiping with you. If you have any questions or want to get connected, please drop us a line at info@movementcolumbus.com. And now more than ever, our friends and neighbors need Jesus. For those of us that are a part of Movement, we give financially out of obedience, to support something that nourishes us and that we believe in, and to be a part of something that's bigger than ourselves. Check out movementcolumbus.com/give to participate in that. We'll see you next time.